video contains content that viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
And welcome back to 100 Horrible Ways People Can Die. I'm John.
And I'm Alex. Today's episode is about electrocution,
where we'll be exploring some of the few ways in which people have been electrocuted and died.
Only a few ways.
Yeah, just a couple of ways.
So, let's get to it.
All right, so let's talk about electricity. It's a powerful force, and it can be deadly if handled improperly.
And it can be deadly if handled properly because it's very, very deadly.
Yeah, contact with power lines or faulty electrical equipment, household appliances, they can all result in electrocution. And some of those can result in death.
Right.
And most of the time, the death occurs because, say you're plugging in your coffee maker or whatever, and you get hit. It disrupts the electrical system to your heart, the signal to your heart, and then your heart goes out of whack. It starts fluttering instead of beating blood, and you end up passing out and dying.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the reasons why you die from
that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways you could die for sure.
And that was not particularly gruesome, but I have some gruesome stuff if you want to hear it.
Let's hear it. Let's hear some gruesome.
Are you sure you want to hear that?
Let's hear it.
Well, there's a couple other ways you could die from electricity too,
Okay.
and it turns out most people who die from electricity, I think this is a common theme in a lot of our shows, are getting killed due to industrial accidents.
Industrial accidents,
and of
as
course,
usual.
in industrial accidents, what do you have more of?
The usual suspects.
Huh?
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects.
Yeah,
the movie?
Like lack of safety.
Well, sometimes safety doesn't even matter, but
Greedy bosses that don't give you the appropriate training.
yeah, greedy bosses who don't give you a paycheck.
Or if it
In
is
this
a paycheck,
podcast.
it's super low.
Well, we'd have to have viewers to have a paycheck.
You're not getting paid.
I know.
Neither am I. So this is fun.
I know. It's not fun.
What else you got? What do you got?
So a lot of electricity deaths or related deaths happen to high voltage lines, which is its own beast. As you talked about, cardiac arrest can happen with voltages, but once you increase the voltages, you get a bunch of other things going on. So, for example, you touch the high powered lines over your house, you're not just going to get a heart attack, you're probably going to melt on the inside. Your organs will be liquefied.
Oh.
Your organs will suffer burns.
Oh.
Yes.
Where's the liquid just drain out?
No, you basically cook yourself inside.
Holy, that'd be pretty
Any
bad.
kind of arcing where there's anything that's extremely high voltage, thousands and thousands of volts.
And amps, right? High amps as well, or no?
Yes, so amps and voltage, if you want to look into it, I'm sure there's millions of YouTube videos about this that can explain it better than we can. I'm just some dummy with no electrical background.
I don't have any electrical background either. I just know that I heard somewhere that they put the stun guns at 2,000 volts.
Yeah.
But it has such a,
volts
or 20,000, but it has such a low amperage that it doesn't kill you, it just stuns you.
Yeah. I mean, we have our basic equations that govern how much power. I always think of it as a river. So a river can have a lot of volume of water.
But a river is more like DC voltage because it only flows one direction, where alternating
You're
current goes
ruining my
back.
analogy here.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So, like anything that's a flow, there's an amount of water. There's also an amount of volume that's associated with it. So a river, if you take the same river and put it into a narrower area, it flows faster. Well, that's your resistance, right? Because you have more resistance if you're narrow. So in a narrower gauge, in a different material, for example, you're always going to have more amperage. So there's some numbers we can look at later. I'll probably want to read those off because I don't remember them exactly. But the amount of resistance your body offers is also a key into determining how you could or could not die from electricity. It doesn't actually take a strong voltage or a strong current to kill you. It matters what resistance your body's offering to it, and the path the electricity is taking is different for everybody.
Gotcha.
And that's why, for example, some people can take a higher voltage in certain situations because the electricity is not passing, let's say, across their body and through their heart. The worst thing you can do is touch two sources of power. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but like this, because then the voltage is directly passing through your heart.
Right. Plus, when you're grounded, right? If you're touching something, it comes all the way through anyways, goes through your heart, right?
True, but it would depend how you're grounding too. Like, I don't know if there's a scenario where you would ground through only your legs, but that would probably mean different.
Yeah.
I don't think that's relatively practical from a physical point of view, but that would make a difference. And one of the most important factors in determining whether you die from electricity is how wet you are. And I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a kinky way. I mean that in
Yeah,
environmental
water's a
way.
very, very good conductor of
Water
electricity.
significantly lowers your electrical resistance.
Yeah, do not stand in water if there's any kind of power line down or anything
Yes,
like that.
it will probably kill you very
yeah,
easily.
for sure.
And
Alright.
then there's a wild card, lightning, natural electricity.
Yeah, I heard about a guy who got hit by lightning like what was
7
it?
times, 8 times, or
7 or
something
8
like that.
times or something,
And survived.
lived.
Every single one of those lived to be 90
each
years
one.
old.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm sure
story.
that'll be a future episode.
Yeah, we
If
definitely
we don't get electrocuted first.
Yeah, we definitely have to talk about that. All right, so let's get into our first historical event. It's a very famous one.
It's relatively
obviously.
recent.
It's very recent, 1972, so 50
Very
years
recent
or
for
so.
you, but not so
50
much for
years
me because I'm
ago.
a little bit younger.
Yep, and it's the electrocution of Les Harvey.
Les Harvey.
So in 1972,
Right.
on May 3rd, tragedy struck the music world when Scottish guitarist Les Harvey died during a performance with his band Stone and Crows.
Stone the Crows.
Stone the Crows.
Yeah,
Yep, thank
Yeah.
you.
you're welcome.
The incident occurred.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
At the Swansea, I think. Swansea?
Yep.
I have no idea. Top rank ballroom. Is
Swansea's top rank.
that how you
ballroom?
pronounce it?
Yeah, I think so.
That was it in England, Wales, somewhere in
I don't know where it's at, to be
somewhere in
honest.
the UK. I don't
Somewhere in the
remember
UK.
exactly where. So as the band played, Les Harvey was setting up his microphone, and unfortunately
he wasn't setting it up. He
Oh,
approached.
toggling it. Like I think he was just trying to adjust the height of it.
Was he?
I would assume
The,
so.
the way I read it, he just he went up to the microphone to sing a verse, and
And
he
grabbed
grabbed it and got
Okay.
electrocuted. Yeah.
So at some point, he made contact with the microphone.
Yes, which was ungrounded.
The microphone was not grounded, and he had a charge
So
from
it
his
grounded
guitar.
through him.
So
yeah.
the path of least resistance was
Mhm.
through his body into
the guitar
into the guitar,
into the amp.
into the amp,
Horrible. Cheap
and he
paper.
basically collapsed and died. Right?
I guess he was unaware the mic was ungrounded, right?
I would assume
He
so.
touched the microphone with his hands were
His
wet
hands
from
were wet.
sweaty.
Oh, okay.
Wetty.
So I guess even something
sweaty
as
hands.
small as your hands being wet
Yeah.
can make a difference in the conductivity and resistance.
And he collapsed on stage,
Right.
and they went on stage to try. Obviously, he collapsed.
Right.
Everybody's like, "What's going on?" And then they went and they tried to give him CPR.
Right. And CPR apparently did not work, and he passed away.
Exactly right. And so they tried to revive him.
Mhm.
He couldn't be revived. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and news of his death sent shockwaves through the music world
Yeah.
about how this young
Stone the Crones was apparently becoming a very popular band. And
Yep,
could have had
and
a
he was
really bright
27
future,
years
and-
old. They were on the rise.
Yeah. It's a really
And-
good Rolling Stones article about them. I think it was Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
read
So yeah, there's it's just crazy. So
Yeah.
all right, so let's imagine the story of someone who was actually there and witnessed it.
Let's do that.
The Top Rank Ballroom was packed to the rafters with fans eagerly awaiting the performance of Scottish rock band Stone the Crows. As the band stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere was charged with excitement. The sound of blazing guitars filled the air, and the crowd erupted into a deafening roar of approval. As a stagehand, Jimmy had been working at the venue for years and had seen his fair share of rock and roll mayhem, but he never witnessed anything like what was about to happen. As Les Harvey reached for the microphone, he received a massive electric shock. The electric shock entered through his hand, traveled through his arm, and then passed through his chest, affecting his heart and other vital organs. The intensity and duration of the shock caused severe burns on his hand and arm, which appeared as red, blistered burns on his skin. The shock caused deep tissue damage to his muscles. As the electric current passed through his chest, it caused his heart to go into a condition called ventricular fibrillation, where the heart's electrical signals become disorganized, leading to a quivering instead of proper contraction. Les collapsed, convulsing in agony as his body struggled to cope with the effects of the shock, which disrupted his nervous system, leading to muscle spasms and involuntary movements. The sudden loss of blood flow to the brain and other vital organs lead to death within minutes. The crowd fell silent, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Panic began to set in as people rushed to the stage, desperate to help Les Harvey. John was among them, pushing his way through the throngs of people, his heart racing with fear. As he got closer to the stage, John could see the band's manager frantically trying to revive Les Harvey. But it was no use. The guitarist was already gone, his lifeless body lying on the stage.
John felt a wave of despair wash over him as he realized the magnitude of what just happened. This was no mere accident. This was a tragedy of epic proportions. Les Harvey had been taken away in an instant. Years later, John would still think back to that night and the terror he had felt as he watched Les Harvey fall to the stage. He would learn about the 27 Club conspiracy made up of several famous musicians, including Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, and now, Les Harvey. But one thing was certain. Les Harvey's death was a tragedy that would never be forgotten, and his music continues to inspire new generations of artists.
So, that was pretty tragic.
Pretty horrible.
Yeah, I would not want to see that.
No.
And it's very interesting about the 27 Club as well, right?
Yeah, it is.
Not the 700 Club, but the
700
27 Club.
Well, I don't know many people who live to the age of 700. Maybe.
No, the 700 Club is
that a thing?
It's a religious television program that's always asking for your money. And the 27 Club
So
is
how much did you give them?
up and coming artists that died at the age of 27, like Jimi Hendrix and Les here died at 27.
Amy
Lots of
Winehouse,
conspiracies. Yep.
Janis
So,
Joplin.
Absolutely look up that conspiracy
Jim
if you're
Henson.
interested. Jim Henson.
I mean, Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison's better. All right, so let's get into a few statistics.
Can we get into 27 statistics? Or is that too many?
No. We need quick statistics.
2.7 statistics.
You got any statistics down there?
On electrocution?
Yeah.
I have a couple up here, but they don't work so good.
Okay, so I'm just going to read off of my sheet
All right,
here.
let's do that.
So the chances... Good. The chances of an accident like the one that happened to Les Harvey occurred...
It's pretty rare, but it has happened.
It's rare.
It has happened again.
Because when things are ungrounded, you have to be careful. When things are ungrounded, it can happen. And that, unfortunately, happens a lot.
There's actually a Argentinian, pop singer in 2018 who died from the same event.
Electrocution.
There's been other people who've been electrocuted at shows who didn't die from it. But
And according to the Electrical Safety Foundation International, about 400 people each year die in the United States of electrocution.
that's about what I've heard as well. Somewhere between a little under 400 to a little over. It varies a lot.
It varies, and some of these occur from just minor, like I was saying,
Yes.
you just like a minor electrocution and your heart flutters, and then the next thing you know, you're not getting blood and you pass out. And the only way to really fix that is with another electric shock.
Yes.
So if you want to touch that open electrical outlet over there, and you were to like get into a heart, no, and you were going to get a heart attack, right? Then I don't have a defibrillator, so maybe I grab the raw electrical outlet, touch you with that. I don't think that would
work.
That's probably not a good idea.
I think that's
First
total
thing I would
BS.
First thing I would do is call 911.
Sure.
So let's see statistics.
I have some more for you here.
Okay.
So the number I had between 1982 and 1994, there were 411, pretty close. There hasn't been that much of a change.
Yeah. Where's the most common place it happens?
Well, as
workplace.
I was about to say.
Why?
So electrocutions were the fifth leading cause of death in that time frame, accounting for 7% of all workplace fatalities.
That's a lot. I mean,
actually more than I thought it would be.
I was trying to find like a particular time of year that might be be more apt to say, okay,
right,
it's December, I better be careful. But I couldn't find anything about
seasonal variation.
Yeah, no seasonal variation.
Which makes sense. You use electricity all year round. So out of the 411 deaths per year on average, it seems there's about 40 to 50 that are through consumer products.
Yes.
Based on data from
Appliances.
2010 to 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are repairing their fridge or doing work in their garage, working on power tools, and they get electrocution.
Yeah, so people
just rewiring their house.
Yeah, some people, like for example, let's say the electric can opener isn't working, and instead of
Who uses an electric can opener?
I don't know, and they'll go to fix it.
Something I haven't seen in
and
a long time.
They don't unplug it.
Do you use an electric can opener?
Yes.
Did you get electrocuted by one?
No.
Is that why you brought it up?
I've never tried to repair my electric can opener, but just make sure you unplug it. There's no power.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing when you're installing like a ceiling fan or a light fixture.
Yes.
Gotta make
turn
sure
off the main.
Gotta make sure the power's off. That's right. You
Yes.
can't just decide, okay, maybe it's good.
Well, I think
Let me test it.
that does seem to be a story in other types of industrial and
Yeah.
do-it-yourselfer accidents where people think that they're good enough to do something, and they may very well be, but there may be some other unfortunate situation going on. So even for professionals out there who are in the field, always try to be as safe as you can. You probably should know better.
Yeah.
I would never do that. So I would hope that if I did become an electrician one day, let's say, or something like that, I would still remember those lessons from.
Yeah. So
before I was
getting into
trained.
safety measures, we got to wear
You
protective
cut
gear.
corners when you do something so much. I do it all the time in my job.
That's true, but like getting into like the safety tips is make
Like
sure
this
you're
one.
wearing your gear, right?
Yes.
Like you're saying,
Yeah.
make sure that the power's off.
Yes.
And then get immediate medical attention if you get shocked.
Yes.
So,
And I've read through a number of stories about how people have died on the workplace from electrocutions,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's completely not even their fault. But
right.
proper safety checklists could have possibly
Checklist
prevented
could help that, yeah.
Sometimes you just touch something accidentally because you didn't know it wasn't grounded, but it
It's
wasn't
always-
grounded, and you.
It's always evolving. If you're wearing the
right.
proper footwear and the gloves, the
Oh.
big rubber gloves and stuff, you reduce the risk.
Reduce the risk, but
you
never
still could
eliminates it
get
completely.
So the best thing, power
I've
off.
seen some stories where
Yeah.
even with the proper safety equipment, it made no difference. But
So let's get into our next historical event.
which one is that one?
That's going to be William Kemmler.
William Kemmler.
He lived from 1860 to 1890. He was the first person to be electrocuted to death in an electric chair. Death sentence.
Right. So the first person purposely killed by electricity.
Yes. So this was at the time when Tesla and Edison were arguing about alternating current and direct current.
Okay.
And Edison was a big time, wanted everybody to have direct current, use his generators. He's trying to get like a generator at every house, right? Instead of you like getting a power plant or whatever, because of the DC current couldn't travel very far. He was selling tons of generators for people's houses, right? So he wanted to keep it that way.
Sure.
So when they were talking about, and this is in New York State, they were changing the laws from people being hung to death. They said, "Oh, that's so inhumane.
Right.
Let's try something new. Let's electrocute them to death." We've seen that Edison's been shocking elephants and stuff, and it's killing them. So let's give that a try. So
Right.
Edison,
I love that logic that if it can kill an elephant, it can kill a human.
yeah. So
Great
or a
logic.
horse, or whatever. So
Very humane.
Edison wanted to make sure that they used an alternating current generator for that electric chair.
I mean, those are different times, I think.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think today you could have an advertisement that says, choose Edison because it's good at killing people.
So I think it was Westinghouse?
Westinghouse was a big player back in the day.
Edison was even trying to like gimmick the word Westinghouse. You've got Westinghouse. He got Westinghoused, meaning that he was killed by electricity. Like he
No, I
was
don't-
trying to get that out there.
I don't think Westinghouse really survived history much.
No, but
Nobody really knows
no
who
one
he
knows
is
who he
anymore.
is. But like
Tesla has, obviously.
yeah.
Edison
he
has
was the
too,
actual
but
inventor.
Westinghouse was the third tenor.
Yeah, he wasn't there.
Everybody knows Placido and everybody knows Luciano, who's the third tenor. Nobody knows.
Right. So let me see here. So I got some notes. So when the first electric chair was invented, the term electrocution hadn't been created yet.
What does the term electrocution actually come from?
It comes from, well, it says here that there were other options. So they had
Oh.
Electrotide,
Sounds horrible.
Electromart,
Awful.
Ampmorted.
What the hell? That's horrible.
Got me, man. They all sound bad, but despite the fact the
Marketing
electric
was
chair was
very good back
portrayed
then.
as humane, it was never really tested on people. Except this guy's going to be like a guinea pig, right?
I mean, I'm sure it was tested on people by accident, but not on purpose.
So
Right.
in this circumstance, what they were trying to do is they were trying to kill by disrupting the heartbeat, like I had explained before.
Uh-huh.
And because the electrocution delivers more than one shock, so when they electrocute you, they might have to do it several times.
It doesn't sound very humane at all.
And because the when they
feel it.
electrocute you, it's like a jolting, like a bam, 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 because they didn't have they just had a generator, and the generator had to charge up the voltage.
It seems like this is not
And then the
humane at
voltage,
all.
they'd hit the lever, and it would hit you.
It seems
and then
extremely torturous.
They'd have to charge it up. So sometimes they'd hit it, and because of the fluctuation, it would hit you and kill you, and they would charge you again and revive you. It was
And-
just sort of really bad. Like
and
it was
somehow
crazy.
this is more humane than hanging people or like shooting them.
It's the logic of
Like execution by
it's the
firing
logic of the
squad
day,
seems
I
a lot
guess.
less.
Yeah, firing rod instant,
Seems
right?
a lot more humane than this even.
Even hanging when
And
they
that
do
kills
it right.
elephants too, right?
It does.
I never
yeah.
heard of an elephant being hung, but I've heard of horses being hung.
Yeah, so William Kemmler became the first person in the world to be killed by an electric chair in the 19th century. And
Okay.
since then, there's been over 4,000 executions by electrocution in the United States.
Wow. Do you think more people have been killed by electrocutions on purpose or by accident?
Man.
I mean, if we count the rest of the world, probably still by accident, just because electricity's everywhere.
Yeah, probably by accident. So
Yeah.
I didn't really make up a story for this.
Okay.
So for this, I kind of took a whole bunch of stuff offline and I put it together. So we're gonna talk about.
So you copyright infringed.
Well, no, I have the source here. So the
Oh, okay.
source is
That makes it better.
I got it from grunge.com here.
Oh, wow.
And it's the untold truth of the world's first person executed by an electric chair is their article. And so really we're just going to go through that article. I'm just going to read through that article.
All right.
And then we can discuss that. So
Sure.
let's do that.
When the electric chair was first invented, the term electrocution had yet to be created. Other terms that were thrown around as options included electricide, electromort, and ampermort, but they didn't stand the test of time. But despite the fact that the electric chair was portrayed as a humane method of execution when it was introduced, there's been little evidence over the years to actually support this claim. Electrocution kills by disrupting a person's heartbeat, but because electrocution typically delivers more than one shock, this means that the electric chair often revives someone several times before finally killing them for good. Meanwhile, a man named William Kemmler became the first person in the world to be killed with the electric chair in the late 19th century. Since then, there have been over 4,000 executions by electrocution in the United States alone, but many of them share the botched nature of the very first execution by electrocution. It took almost 100 years after the first electrocution for the Supreme Court to review the constitutionality of electrocution, after they were inspired by over a dozen botched electrocutions in Florida. But while many states in the United States have since abandoned the use of the electric chair, in states like South Carolina, death row inmates are still offered the choice between the electric chair and a firing squad. This is the untold truth of the world's first person executed by electric chair. William Francis Kemmler was born on May 9, 1860, to German immigrant parents in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Kemmler left school by the age of 10 and worked a variety of jobs until he set himself up as an independent fruit and vegetable trader at the age of 19. Said to be illiterate, some reports also described Kemmler as intellectually disabled. According to Old Sparky by Anthony Galvin, Kemmler began drinking whiskey as soon as he could afford to and quickly became a heavy drinker. It was reportedly after one particularly heavy bender that Kemmler woke up in Camden, New Jersey to find that he'd married Ida Forder. But after Kemmler realized that Forder hadn't even divorced her first husband, he left her and moved in with Matilda Ziegler upon returning to Philadelphia. Although Ziegler was also married, she'd reportedly left her husband because of his constant adultery and the fact that she'd contracted an STD as a result. Kemmler and Ziegler ran off to Buffalo, New York in 1888 with Ziegler's 4-year-old daughter. But in The Electric Chair, Craig Brandon writes that the three of them didn't exactly experience domestic bliss together. Neighbors often heard loud and violent arguments coming from their apartment and reported that both were known to have violent tempers. Some said they often heard blows being struck, but no one intervened. On March 29, 1889, things escalated irreversibly. William Kemmler reportedly seemed sober, according to his employees, but after Matilda Ziegler came out to ask him to get some eggs, instead of going to get eggs, Kemmler picked up a hatchet and followed Ziegler inside. Galvin writes in Old Sparky that Kemmler then proceeded to hit Ziegler over 25 times with the hatchet as Ziegler's daughter watched. According to The Electric Chair, the neighbors reportedly heard screams and the sounds of fighting as early as 8 in the morning, but because such sounds occurred so often, the neighbors ignored them as they'd become accustomed to doing. But this time, things were different. This time, Kemmler came running into the kitchen of his neighbor, Mary Reed, drunk and covered in blood, and admitted to Reed that he'd killed Ziegler, according to The Electric War by Mike Winchell. I've killed her. I had to do it. There was no help for it. I'll hang for the deed. Either one of us had to die. Ziegler somehow survived the initial attack, but she died several hours later at the hospital. Meanwhile, Kemmler repeatedly insisted that his temper was to blame and that he was better off being hanged as soon as possible. But although Kemmler would certainly be convicted and executed sooner rather than later, he didn't realize that he was about to become a human guinea pig for a new execution method. Less than 1 year before William Kemmler's murder of Matilda Ziegler, the state of New York passed the Electrical Execution Act, also known as the Electrocution Act, on June 4, 1888. Under this act, anyone sentenced to death after January 1, 1889, would be sentenced to electrocution instead of being hanged. But according to Fordham Law School, because the act hadn't specified whether alternating currents, AC, or direct currents, DC, was going to be used, the Medico-Legal Society of New York was given the task of determining the current to be used. As a result, the use of electrocution as a method of execution also became caught up in what was known as the War of Currents. In Demands of the Dead, Katie Ryan writes that the decision to use electrocution instead of hanging was based on the idea that the barbarity of capital punishment could be eliminated by adopting a new scientific method, and that these human alternatives could mitigate any public sympathy towards executed people. Thomas A. Edison and George Westinghouse battled over the execution of William Kemmler as part of the War of Currents for almost 2 years. While Westinghouse developed the use of AC for electric power distribution, Edison developed the use of DC, and in order to maintain a monopoly on electrical power distribution contracts, he was determined to convince everyone of the danger of AC, according to the Electric Chair. And after Governor David Hill passed the Electrical Execution Act, Edison did everything he could to ensure that the dangerous AC was involved in the execution. According to Profiles in Folly by Alan Axelrod, Edison even commissioned Harold P. Brown to build the first ever electric chair for New York's executions. Edison wanted the chair to be built with a Westinghouse AC generator. Edison was so intent on misinforming people about the so-called dangers of AC compared to DC that he was willing to do anything to convince people. According to Elephants Under Human Care by Paul A. Reese, this is why Edison staged a series of public electrocutions using animals like dogs and cats. He also started trying to popularize the term Westinghousing to mean death by electrocution. On August 6, 1890, William Kemmler was dressed in a suit and taken to the basement of Auburn Prison, where the electric chair was set up. According to the New York Times, there were 25 witnesses there to watch the first execution by electrocution, 14 of whom were doctors there to evaluate the electrocution. The proceedings seemed strangely casual as Kemmler took off his coat and sat in the chair after being introduced to the witnesses in the room. After electrodes were attached to Kemmler's body and a black cloth was placed over his head, he was exposed to 17 seconds of 1,000 volts of electricity at 6:43 a.m. Oliver writes in Technologies of Life and Death, causing Kemmler to turn bright red and have a seizure. After 17 seconds, the current was turned off, and the doctors pronounced him to be dead. But within seconds, Kemmler's groans showed that he was unfortunately very much alive. Although he remained unconscious, writes the Washington Post, his heart and lungs were clearly still working, and his breathing was labored as he drooled. Although one doctor ordered another round of electricity, they had to wait several minutes for the generator to power up before they could deliver the second shock. Once the generator had powered up again, William Kemmler was subjected to another electric current, this time using 2,000 volts. Technologies of Life and Death writes that this second shock, which Kemmler was subjected to for over 1 minute, caused his blood vessels to burst and his skin to catch fire. Some reports even claim that the second round of electrocution lasted over 4 minutes, according to the Washington Post. This second shock finally killed Kemmler, as witnesses reported the smell of burnt flesh and hair, accompanied by the sounds of crackling. George Westinghouse later reportedly remarked that they would have done better using an axe, playing on the murder weapon used by Kemmler himself. The scene was too much for some of the witnesses to bear. Some collapsed in the room, while others, like the district attorney who'd prosecuted the case, ran out and collapsed in the hallway. 3 hours later, An autopsy was conducted, after which the doctors concluded that because Kemmler was rendered unconscious by the first electrical shock, he likely experienced no pain throughout the electrocution. They also claimed that even though Kemmler wasn't killed instantly, this was because of a faulty machine, rather than any issue with the method of execution itself.
Well, you can read more about that at grunge.com. You can find that article or other articles, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some stuff on Wikipedia. There's a bunch of books that have been written about executions and some other stuff like that.
There's tons of stuff out there to read about. So.
Yeah, for you people who find that fascinating, and I personally don't, but it was an interesting story.
Yeah.
Too much of a murder mystery for me, though.
I like the historical properties of our stories a lot more than anything else, to be honest with you. But
it's nicer to talk about historical events because they're more divorced from reality. So it's easier to talk about them and not be as
but they're real life
horrified.
events. Yeah,
they are.
Well,
minus that one event.
Yeah, minus the one
that we made up.
Yeah,
we filmed on April Fool's Day. We should have probably mentioned that it was kind of an
Right.
April Fool's joke, but we're not very good about mentioning things.
But we might give you fake ones in the future too. So make sure you look up all of our episodes to
Yeah,
make sure that they're legit.
And make sure that we're correct, because we're also known to be liars.
Well, we don't lie, but the person, I shouldn't say person, the AI that writes some of our episodes, he's sometimes, or she, or it,
Whatever it chooses to identify as.
it seems to sometimes tell fibs, and occasionally we don't notice in time.
And we don't have a researcher on staff, so we can't verify what it says sometimes.
Our researcher is our writer.
That seems like a conflict of interest there.
I understand, but I mean, the budget.
Well, I guess we can't do anything about that.
All right,
let's get back into our topic.
all right. So let's see. Oh, you have lots of stuff to talk about today.
Yes. We talk about sometimes historical events, but some feedback that we've gotten recently, which we finally gotten around since we're shooting some new episodes.
Yep. We shoot in advance.
We shoot a few weeks
so
in
we're a little
advance.
late.
We're a little late, so nothing personal if we don't.
One of the people said that we
One
should.
of the two people.
We should explain
should
more
be-
of the gruesome.
We should be
aspects.
gruesome and horrific.
More gruesome because the
we
title
are
of our show.
100 horrible ways
So we
people
should
to die.
explain the horribleness.
We've explained ways people can die, but we haven't been horribly. I mean,
Right.
we've horribly explained them, as in
We
we've done a
have.
bad job to do it.
Yeah.
We haven't told them about the horrible bits and parts.
So
try
we're
that.
just gonna warn you now that if you have a weak stomach, maybe grab a bucket.
Yes, and some of these stats about electrocutions might be a little shocking to hear. So that was horrible.
Pun intended. All right.
Oh, no, pun was not. Of course it was. All right. So based on the research I've done, the 16 milliamp current
16 milliamps.
is very small.
It does seem small.
It does. Now, this is mathematically also factoring in voltage and resistance. So, as
And
we
each
mentioned
person's different
exactly, as
for
we mentioned
resistance.
earlier, and I have that in here, for example, there's a token amount of resistance measured in ohms that the body normally...
Oh man, this is getting too technical.
Let's go back to gruesome stuff.
Yeah, let's move on.
At a certain enough current, doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, we're not getting into that.
We're not going to get into that. You can look up some other videos.
Yeah.
The current can pass through your body and not interfere with your basic electrical signals.
Right.
But above that threshold, which again varies depending on situations and body chemistry, if you touch an object, or I guess touch an object that's not the microphone,
Right.
because that creates a lot of feedback and it's
Yeah,
not grounded. If you touch an object, that current will flow into your body, and if it's enough of a current, it actually overwrites the signals from your brain. So if I'm
Right.
grabbing onto an object that's electrified,
Not a microphone.
not a microphone.
Because we just heard
We
about
tried that, and
an
it was-
ungrounded microphone though.
Oh
and it
yeah, we did.
almost killed, and they did
I
kill
mean,
them.
that was not
So let's not.
for you
grab.
guys. It was just recently. For us, it was like an hour ago. 'cause we're
Yes.
still
Don't.
filming.
So don't touch the microphone. Don't do that.
Yeah.
All right, move on.
Yeah. Anyway, so you touch something that's not grounded, it will pass through your body and overwrite your signal from your brain, saying, "Hey, let go of this," so you can no longer voluntarily let go of that object.
Because your muscles are
Your muscles have contracted, and
and you
depending
can't
on
release.
how those muscles contract, which parts of your body and the
'Cause
current
the electrical signal from our brain
is
is
electrical.
weaker
Much weaker.
than the electrical signal we're being electrocuted
Exactly.
by, so we can't forcibly open our hand.
Exactly. So that's between a small amperage and a relatively larger amperage, and depending on the situations, that could be something that your household current could definitely trigger, especially if you're wet and you're having less resistance to electric current. If you have a high voltage line, which is where we see a lot of our deaths coming from too, and especially in industrial settings, it's a completely different ballgame. At that point, you have different kinds of injuries too. Not only can you suffer from cardiac arrest, but there's enough current going through you that it can literally cook you.
Right.
So you'll suffer from internal organ failure.
And you have burns on your
So
hands or
burns,
exit points.
exit
or whatever,
points.
Yeah.
There's different signs you can look for. So some burns look like a physical heat burn,
Yeah.
but what happens is it's actually your skin because of the path and the resistance your body's. Oh, the high current is putting a lot of charge into your body.
Yeah.
Your body's giving resistance, but it's overheating. You're actually being cooked while you're getting the current flowing through
Right.
you. So those are killers too. You know, your overhead power lines, I think they run at over 3,000 volts.
Mm-hmm.
They have a transformer that brings it down to your voltage for your house.
Right.
If you touch those lines, forget it. You're cooked.
Right.
And you will
But
definitely not be able to let
You
go.
see birds land on those all the time. So one's
Right.
probably positive and one's negative or something. What is that about?
So,
'Cause birds
electricity
aren't
is
get-
like water.
Birds
It
aren't
wants-
popping up there.
Right. They can, though. And there are cases. I'm
Yeah,
sure you
yeah.
can find videos on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah.
If you're already on here, you might as well look, right? Where there are situations where that happens. The reason that doesn't happen is because the bird is touching something and then it's not offering a path of resistance for that electricity to go
it's
elsewhere.
Going, yeah, it's
So the bird is actually charged when it's sitting on those power
going
lines.
through the bird.
If you were to touch that bird and you were grounded, it would kill you and the bird instantly. You
Gotcha.
would fry.
So it's going right through the bird.
Just
down,
going through the
still
bird.
going down the wire.
Right, it's going on the outside of the bird, but you're not offering a path for most. There's like a, I believe, I'm not an engineer, but I believe there's like some token branch of current that goes through it and says, okay, this is not really a path for me to go, so most of the current still flows around the conductor.
Gotcha.
And the human body, the bird, or any animal like a squirrel on there is a much worse conductor
Mm.
than the power line itself.
Right.
Because if it wasn't a good conductor, why would it be using the power lines?
Yeah.
Right. So those animals sitting on there have no issues for the most part that we know of. But if they were to touch two different lines, then forget it. They would be instantaneous
Death.
death for them. They would be fried. You can also have them arc. So, for example, if a bird was sitting on it and another line was
arc
too
from
close to it, it can
So
arc for
I
it.
did watch a video where a bunch of birds landed on the power line.
Uh-huh.
It started sagging down,
And touch
and-
another one.
and it
Ah.
exploded.
That's
and birds
interesting.
dropped, and some flew away, but the lines broke.
So that
and
could
came
happen.
to the ground. from
In
the
theory,
birds.
if there were enough birds landing
Yeah.
simultaneously on a power line,
yeah,
and they formed an arc bridge between that and another line,
yeah,
they could all arc while in midair. Because it doesn't really matter where they're sitting, what they're as long
Right.
as they offer a path for that electricity, it'll happen.
right.
And that would be pretty interesting to see. Not for the birds, but
Obviously not for
Yeah.
birds, but they're just birds.
and then it can get worse than
Just
that
kidding.
even.
Birds are.
Birds are pretty cool animals. Yeah. Let's see. How gruesome does this get? Do.
Yeah. Do you have a description of something? Let's hear it.
Well, I've read some stories, but you can get charred to death by current if it's high enough. Meaning that the current, so your body is providing resistance.
Mm-hmm.
That resistance basically generates so much heat.
Heat that it burns you.
The current,
catch on
as
fire.
long as you're still creating that bridge and it's not an arc and then it goes away, if that current is flowing for a long period of time, you're basically being cooked very
So-
quickly. Like an induction cooker cooks through. Well, induction cooker is a bad example because it's cooking through.
Yeah, but what
contact.
you're saying is that you could literally catch on fire.
Yeah.
So our
Oh, yeah.
last episode that was on fire,
You could be burned alive through electric stuff.
so the electricity
Yeah.
hits your hand and goes out your foot, and
Right.
the resistance of your body causes it to heat up,
Yes.
and you just combust into flames.
I don't know if,
if
it's
it's-
flames,
if it's high enough.
but yeah.
Maybe.
Flames would imply that there's some kind of fuel source on your body that's really flammable, but it would probably be more like a dry burn or something like that.
Okay.
I don't think how you see in the movies is exactly realistic.
All right.
Your skeleton doesn't flash before your eyes,
No.
but in theory, if you left somebody on that, remember, people can't let go at those high
Yeah, yeah,
voltages. So if you grab this and you grab this,
And then I grab
and
you,
you're a bridge,
and then I'm grabbing
Yes.
you, and we're both getting shocked.
and sadly, there are cases where people are moving objects and somebody is involuntarily grounded and they can't let go of an object that's electrified, and somebody else grabs them and they will both die.
Ah,
Sometimes that happens. A common thing on job sites is some kind of boom, like a ladder
yeah.
or crane hits an overhead power line, and whoever touches that object is becoming the ground.
Mm.
So if I'm touching a crane that's touching a power line, I become the least passive resistance to the ground because I'm probably
Closest to
closest, but I'm
yeah,
also offering less resistance than the rubber tires of the
Right.
crane.
right.
Or
And your shoes
whatever they
probably
have.
the rubber on your shoes isn't as thick or whatever.
rubber on the shoe. Rubber is a very good insulator, but it's not as good as, let's say, a rubber tire. Like,
Yeah.
my heel is obviously much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And something else that I wanted to mention in the fire episode that I didn't get a chance to mention, but you mentioned being burned alive.
Mm-hmm.
When you're being cremated, which is obviously probably the most common way people are burned alive, but they're already dead, so it doesn't
Yeah.
count. Just like with the electrical part, where if you heat up and you burn whatever and combust,
Mhm.
you won't actually turn into ash. Your skeleton will still probably remain. They actually, when you cremate somebody, you actually are left with most skeletons. They fragment in time and they pop and break sometimes, but they actually grind it down into an ash.
Could they use electricity to cremate people if they wanted to?
They probably could, but I think it would be very difficult to create a situation where the body doesn't like fall apart.
Gotcha.
'Cause once there's no ligaments or there's no connecting material before it, which will probably burn off pretty quickly, there'll be nothing left. So there'll still be
Nothing to conduct anymore.
nothing to conduct anymore.
Gotcha.
So you'd have to like wire it up somehow, and that kind of
So
defeats
gas.
the purpose of it.
So gas is the best bet.
It's probably cheaper to use gas than the amount of electricity you need for that too,
Right.
and it's probably a lot safer because that seems very unsafe.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
All right, so I think that's all we have time for today.
yeah, stay tuned for another episode eventually, probably next week.
Yep, and
And as always,
remember,
stay safe out there.